Welcome to Long Blue Leadership, where transformative journeys of Air Force Academy graduates come to life. There are moments in a leader's life that leave a permanent mark. For my guest today, Colonel Retired Michael Black, USAFA class of '85, one such moment came when he was actually sent to deliver news of a combat-related death. It was the first time he'd ever been tasked with that duty, and he knew he only had one chance to get it right. As he sat with the widow, Michael found the strength to guide the family through their grief. That part of Michael's story speaks to the depth of his empathy and the calm steadiness that defines him as a leader. We'll explore much more of Michael's journey, from leading the White House communications team to mentoring cadets at the Academy to daily practices that ground him and the framework that guides him today, what he calls the 5 F's of leadership: family, fitness, flying, fairness, and fun. A guide not only for his life, but for the leaders he inspires. Michael, welcome to Long Blue Leadership.
Well, Navir, thank you for having me, and thank you for that very kind introduction. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm just thankful for what you guys do, the AOG, and putting this together and telling stories. I think this is amazing, so thank you for the opportunity.
Well, we're grateful here. You've got your silver on, you've got your 85, best of luck.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm just blown away here.
Yes. I got it all,
your class crest, yes.
And 2 squadrons that I was in.
Yes.
It's just excited to hear back for our 40th reunion.
Yes.
So that's amazing. So fellowship and fun with your classmates, and just seeing the mountains, getting off the plane and looking west,
yes,
and seeing the mountains and seeing God's creation is just amazing. And then, of course, the Academy in the background, pretty excited.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, we're going to jump right in. And actually, the topic is a bit sensitive, but I think it's really important because we know that when we all raise our right hand, some are prepared and they do give all. But not everyone has to actually give the news to the family when their loved one is lost. So maybe you can share what that was like.
Now, thank you for allowing me to talk about that. You hit the nail on the head when you said you only have one chance to get it right when you're talking to the family. And so I had a young staff sergeant that was deployed downrange, the Horn of Africa, and he happened to be a radio operator in a helicopter supporting the Marines. And there was a mid-air collision that happened while he was deployed, and he was one of the people that perished. So the first notification that I had to make was duty status whereabouts unknown, to say that to the family. And of course, you can think about the range of emotions that are associated with that. They don't know. Right. We don't know.
There's still hope. There's not hope. There's
exactly.
Right.
So that was the first day.
Oh.
So going over there with my first sergeant, a medical team, chaplain, that kind of thing to support us and the family.
And what rank were you at that time?
So I was a lieutenant colonel. So I was a squadron commander of the 1st Comm Squadron at Langley Air Force Base. And I like to say that you don't get to practice that. You have one time to get it right. There's, at least back then, there was not a lot of training to do that. It doesn't happen that often.
Right.
And so, having to make that notification was a tough thing. It was one of the hardest things, if not the hardest thing I had to do in the service. 2 young boys. He had 2 sons. And at the time, his spouse was military as well. So I go over there to do that the first day. You can imagine, knocking on the door, right? And I'm in uniform and, just the emotions that can be going through. So we're sitting on the couch in their house, 2 young boys. I believe their ages were 3 and 5 at the time. They were very young. And I explained, to Michelle, what we knew. And again, it's scripted. I can't say more or less than that because 1, I don't know.
Right.
And 2, you just don't want to speculate on anything. And then we're waiting, to find out, his status. And so then I have to go back the next day to make that notification. And you're representing the Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force. And that's kind of something that's scripted for you. I'm here on the behalf of the Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force, and I regret to inform you of the untimely death of your spouse. The part that was even more heartening for me was after I told her, and with the boys sitting, I believe, on either side of me, she said, and now Colonel Black is going to tell you what happened to your dad. That was a tough thing to do. And I would say it was the hardest thing that I had to do, in
Mm-hmm.
the Air Force in my career. And reflect on, you have one chance to
Mm-hmm.
get that right. I believe we got it right, me and my team, but that was tough.
Right. Wow. Have you kept in touch with the family?
Yes, I keep in touch with Michelle, just from just a personal, because I'm very personal. I'm outgoing, as you know,
Yes.
and so I've kept in touch with Michelle and the boys. But we're forever bonded,
Right.
by that, and I think that's important to stay in touch. And that's kind of one of my things I think we'll get into a little bit later in the conversation. But that's what I do.
Right. Well, it touches certainly into, I think, the family aspect of the five
Yeah.
F's, and because it seems like you even take in them as your family. And I'm curious about your family, because when you were going through that, I mean, you have at least a son. You have a
Right.
son, right?
Yes, a son and
so
two daughters.
two daughters, right? So were you thinking about? Did you put on your dad hat in that moment?
I certainly did put on my dad hat, and I think that helped,
Right.
in things. And I think all of the training that I got along the way about dealing with tough situations and being a leader, it helped. But I took it upon myself after that to talk to other commanders,
Mm-hmm.
and in fact, my wing commander at the time, Burt Field.
Oh, yes, General
So
Field.
General Field
Yes.
was 79 grad,
Mm-hmm.
and we talked, and that also brought him and I closer, because he also asked me to brief the other squadron commanders on that process
Mm.
and how I handled that. And and to this day, General Field and I are still very connected, and he's pretty engaged right now with
Yes.
the Air Force Association and the
Yes.
birthday,
Yes.
and all that. But a great mentor of mine who also helped, in dealing with that. But he was extremely supportive, and I think that had a factor in just how he evaluated me,
Right.
how I handled that situation.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like you certainly picked up some of those traits of taking care of your people, recognizing empathy within processes and sharing it. I'm curious, were you always like this, or did you see some of this emulated from your family?
No, it's a great question. I am a military brat. My dad was in the Army. My dad went to Tuskegee. It was called Tuskegee Institute at that
Mm-hmm.
time. My mom went to Alabama A&M. So two schools in Alabama. They're from a very small towns in Alabama. My dad is from Beatrice, Alabama, which is less than 200 people today, and my
Wow.
mom is from Brettenburg, Alabama, which is about 15 miles away, and it's even smaller than Beatrice. But they went to the same elementary school and high school, so high school sweethearts, and then they went
Oh.
off to college. And then Dad got a direct commission in the Army, the Signal Corps. Well, he started out in the Medical Service Corps, and then that. But getting back to your question, so yes, family, with that, and even take it a step further back to my grandparents,
Mm-hmm.
on both sides of the family, but particularly with my paternal grandparents. They went out and visited Tuskegee Institute at that time,
Mm-hmm.
and they saw the statue of lifting the veil of ignorance there, and they decided at that point that they wanted their kids to go to that school. And so
Wow.
there's 7 kids within my dad's family, and 6 of them went to Tuskegee.
Wow. So I want to fast forward a little bit, and you can certainly share, whether it was during the academy or after graduation, but you have you had this great foundation from your family. Let's talk a little bit about the academy or after academy experience where you had seen additional time where you had grown as a leader. Was there a particular experience that can come to mind where another shaping of this like leadership journey that you've been on?
Yeah, I think there's multiple,
Mhm.
throughout my career. I went to the Army Command and General Staff College for my intermediate professional military education,
Mhm.
and there's a story there too. My dad was in the Army, and so I wanted to experience some of the things that my dad did, even though I was Air Force. And so one of my mentors, now retired Lieutenant General Harry Radegay, was instrumental in me getting selected for Army Command and General Staff College. And so I went there, and I think that was a big portion of my shaping. Although had mentors and folks and coaches in my life leading up to that were helped shape me. But that going to that school, and what I noticed when I got there, that the Army was very serious about leadership and leadership philosophy. So much so that we took a class on that where we had to develop a leadership philosophy. And so in taking that class, before the Christmas break, I found out that I was going to be a squadron commander. Right? And so I was a major, and I was going to be a squadron commander. And so in that leadership course, I said, well, I'm going to go be a squadron commander. I'm going to the 5th Combat Comm Group in Georgia. Let me make this philosophy that I'm doing in class be my philosophy, so that when I get there, and that was really the first time that I thought very serious about, okay, what is my leadership philosophy? I mean, I had been a flight commander before and had people under my, my tutelage, if you will. But being a squadron commander, being on G series orders,
Right.
And we know how the military takes the importance of being a commander.
Yes.
And so having that, so I did decide to develop my philosophy during that time. And you mentioned the 5 Fs earlier, and so that became the opportunity to develop that. So family.
That's when it was.
That's when I developed that in that course.
Wow.
So family, fitness, flying, fairness, and fun, the 5 Fs. I worked on that when I got there. And so then when I got to take command, I had prepared all of that stuff in this academic environment. And I used it to a T. And I briefed the squadron after I took command. Hey, this is my command philosophy, the 5 Fs. I subsequently had the opportunity to command 2 more times after that, another squadron, and then at the White House Communications Agency, which is now Wing Command equivalent. So had the opportunity to tweak and refine, but the foundation was still the 5 Fs. And so in doing that, and I can go into a little detail on each one of those.
Yes.
So, family is your immediate family, your blood family, and that kind of thing. But family also encompasses your unit, your extended family, and part of that. And so I always tell people, your family, you don't want to be the only one at your retirement ceremony because you neglected your family. And I've done many retirement ceremonies. In fact, I've done 25 plus since I retired.
Wow. Well, that just shows the impact that you've really made.
No. So family is important. Take care of your family. And one of the things I said about that to the folks was, if you in your unit, if folks are getting assigned a unit, permanent change of station, PCS to your unit, and they haven't found a place to live in the due time, whatever the house hunting days are, I always gave my folks the option of give them some more time to find a place. They may be looking for schools. They may be looking for a place that just fits, the environment that they need. And let's give them that time now.
Right.
Because they're not going to be effective in the organization if they're worried about where they have to live, where their kids are going to go to school, and that kind of thing. So take care of all of that and then get them to work.
Right.
And they'll be, that much more effective because they won't have to worry about where they're living, where the kids are going to school. So take care of your family. Fitness, you understand physical fitness and what you do and all of that. And I admire all of your accomplishments,
Thank you.
In that. And so physical fitness in the military kind of goes without saying. You have to, maintain certain standards and do that and do PT and take a test and that kind of thing. But fitness is more than just physical fitness. It's spiritual and mental fitness. Now, would never be one to tell somebody this is how you need to nurture your spiritual and mental fitness. I think that's personal. But if your spiritual and mental fitness is not being nourished, you're not going to be doing yourself any good, your team any good. And honestly, you would be able to tell if an individual is struggling with their spiritual or mental fitness, particularly as a leader, and just kind of looking and observing the characteristics and the behavior of folks. So I basically told my team, I want you to, do whatever it takes to nurture your spiritual and mental fitness, whatever you need to do. If it's meditating, if it's praying, if it's walking,
Right.
whatever is personal to you, but make sure that it's nurtured. But I also told my folks that if you think that my spiritual fitness and mental fitness is out of balance, I want you to tell me, because I might have blinders on. I could be focused on things just like they could be focused on things, and I would tell them. And I think folks really appreciated the candor and the openness of the leader, the commander, saying that, yes, I want you to tell me if you think my spiritual and mental fitness is out of balance.
Did you ever have anyone tell you that?
I did. I had strong relationships with my first sergeant, or my command sergeant major, the senior enlisted advisor. So we were worked hand in hand in all the places I was at. And so yes, I've had them. I've had my wife tell me that. So I think that's important. Like I said, you can easily have blinders on and maybe just not see that, or have blind spots.
Right.
And speaking of that, I've written a leadership article on blind spots. And so I'm kind of studied that and understand that. So that's fitness. Flying. At the time, the primary mission of the Air Force was flying. Right. And so I'd always say, what is your role in supporting the primary mission, or what is our role in supporting the primary mission of the Air Force? So make sure you understand that, as a communicator, how do you contribute to the primary mission, or as a logistician, or, as a information management, but understand what your role is in the primary mission of the Air Force. Fairness, as a leader, it is so important for the leader to be fair, right? It can affect good order and discipline if you're not fair. But equally important is to be perceived as being fair. So I could think I'm being fair. I could think that I'm being fair. But if the perception of the unit, the team, is that I'm not being fair, that's just as detrimental to the mission as not being fair, right? And so I think perceptions are important, and you need to understand that, and you need to be aware of the perceptions. You need to be ready to receive the information and the feedback from your team, on that. And so I stressed fairness, and I stressed the importance of also the perception. People have different vantage points. I could be looking at something over there, and I say, okay, yeah, the sky is blue over there, but somebody looking at it from a different, they may see a touch of some clouds in there, and so they see some white in there, and from their vantage point. And it's just like that in life, respect everybody's vantage point, in things. And so that was the fairness aspect. Then finally, fun. I'm a person that likes to have fun.
You are?
Yes, I am. I'm a person that loves to have fun. And so for me, I grew up playing sports, and so I played sports throughout my Air Force career. So that was kind of one of the things I did for fun. Intramurals.
What was your favorite sport? Or
my favorite sport was baseball growing up.
Okay.
I mean, I dreamed about, trying to play in the major leagues and, that kind of stuff. And I played on a lot of baseball teams growing up. And then when I got into the service, played softball. And I played competitive softball. Back in the day, they have base softball teams. And so you would, try out for the team. And I would try out, and I played on base team at probably at least 4 or 5 bases that I was at. So these are my own words, I was good. So I played, and, was very competitive in intramurals. That's another way to bring your team together, camaraderie. They see the boss out there playing. And I always would tell folks that, on the squadron team, they're not playing me because I'm the commander. They're playing me because I'm good. Okay, I can contribute to the wins in a game. But so I was very competitive. I wasn't a win at all costs, but it wasn't fun to lose.
Right.
So being competitive and fun. So that's one of the things I did for fun. I also follow professional sports. San Antonio Spurs is my basketball team. Okay. Washington Commanders is my football team. So I would go to those events, those games, those contests, and stuff like that. Music, concerts, still do that kind of stuff with my kids and my family.
Yes.
Incorporate fun into, so it's not all work and no play. Right. I think you do yourself, justice by, winding down, relaxing a little bit, and having fun and that kind of thing. And so I encouraged my team to do that. I wasn't going to tell people what they needed to do for fun. I think that's personal. But having fun is important, and it helps strike that balance. So that's really the 5 Fs, and I carried that, as I said, every time I commanded, every time I've unit that I'd been associated with, particularly after the 2000 graduation from Army Command and General Staff College, and I still carry that 5 Fs today. And incidentally, I think if you bump into somebody who was in one of my units, they're gonna remember the 5 Fs or some portion of it. In fact, I have a couple mentees that commanded after me, and they adopted the 5 Fs as their command philosophy. And that's kind of something that's very satisfying as a leader to have somebody adopt your leadership style. They think that it was good. For them while they were, in the unit. And it's very flattering to see that afterwards. I mean, so much so that I've had people that were in my unit, and then they got assigned to one of my mentees' unit, and they would call me up and they'd say, "Hey, Colonel Black, Colonel Packler says his command philosophy is the 5 Fs." And I said, "Well, yeah." I said, "Mark was in my unit at Langley, and he probably, felt that." But
wow,
that's a true story.
That's a legacy right there.
Yes.
That's wonderful. Well, speaking of legacy, you have a son that's also a graduate.
Yes.
So talk about that. I mean, you were expected to go to college. It wasn't a, if, it was where. How about your children? Was that kind of the expectation?
Yes. So my wife is a college graduate. She's a nurse as well. And so we preached education, throughout. And just as an aside, a shout out to my wife who just completed her PhD program requirements.
Congratulations! Yes.
Wilda Black last week, in doing that. And so between my family, my immediate family, so my wife and my 2 daughters and my son, there are 15 degrees between us.
You did okay, and you
and me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the 5 of us, there are 15 degrees. My wife has 2 masters, a bachelor's, and now a PhD. My oldest daughter has a bachelor's and 2 masters. My son has a bachelor's and a master's. My youngest daughter has a bachelor and a master's, and I have a bachelor's and 3 master's degrees. So I think that adds up to 15.
I lost count, but social sciences major here.
So yes, education, and so my son, he really likes quality things growing up, and so he was looking at schools and researching and looking at the Ivy League, some of the Ivy League schools, and some other schools that had strong reputations. I purposely did not push the Air Force Academy to him because I didn't want him to go for the wrong reasons. I didn't want him to go because I went there, and that kind of thing. But late in the game, in his summer going into his senior year of high school, he came to me and said, "Hey," and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, "Hey, Dad, your alma mater is pretty good, pretty has a strong reputation." And I said, "Yeah, strong academic curriculum and everything else there." So that summer, he said, "Well, I'm thinking I might want to go there," and I'm thinking to myself, though, that's a little bit late in the game, right? The summer going into your senior year.
Did you recruit your mom to do his appointment?
Yes. So mom got involved. And then I think, Carolyn Benishek.
Yes.
So Carolyn was the director of admissions. I reached out to her and just said, "Hey, I got my son that's interested." They were actually coming to Baltimore, I believe, for a kind of
like a Falcon experience.
Yes.
Right.
And so we went to see her, and I'll just kind of say the rest is history. Through her help and guidance, through my son's qualifications to do all that, he was able to get in. He went to the prep school.
Okay.
Which was great, and I just want to give a shout out to the prep school for that. I did not attend the prep school, but I saw the value of my son going to the prep school and then being coming to the academy. So I just to this day, I'm thankful for our prep school and how they prepare folks.
We feel similarly about that.
Yes.
So
so he went, and so of course a proud dad, right? Your son following in your footsteps and that kind of thing. So Clinton Black is in the Space Force now.
Okay.
And he's assigned to Vandenberg. But my son, he was a soccer player growing up, played a lot of competitive soccer, came here and decided that he wanted to do Wings of Blue.
Oh.
And so he was on Wings of Blue parachute team. And the neat thing about that is that the jump wings that my son wears are the jump wings that my dad earned at airborne school
Oh
in
my
1964
goodness. Wow.
or 65, sometime in the early 60s. And so my dad was still living at the time. And so he was able to come out here and, pin the wings on
How
Clinton.
special.
So it skipped a generation because I didn't jump or anything, but my son jumped, and he has mid 500s
Whew.
number of jumps that he's had, and so my dad was able to see him jump. And that was, even though airborne is a teeny bit different than free fall, but
Yes.
still, parachuting and all of that. So getting to see Clinton excel and do that, and see him jump into the stadiums and that kind of thing. He jumped with some of the former Navy SEALs in the X Games, in the mountains. So that was just a proud parent moment.
Wow. That is very exciting. And so, like, through all of these experiences that you had, I keep wanting to go back to the 5 Fs. You had mentioned earlier that you did some refinement to it. So where you are now, how are you using them? How have they been refined? I mean, flying.
Yes.
What is that?
Yeah.
Is that dangerous
So
to
I
replace it with
asked
mission?
people. Yeah, I asked people to take a little bit of a leap in that understand where it came from.
Mhm.
In my 5S, but that aspect refers to the mission,
Right.
right? And so the Air Force mission has evolved to include space and that kind of thing. But even on the private side, the civilian side, I still use the 5Fs,
Mhm.
and so the flying aspect just refers to the mission or whatever the
Perfect.
mission of your organization is. And so there was some refinement, going along as we brought in, space into our mission, but it really reflected on, the mission. And so I had different AFSCs that worked for me
Mhm.
in the different units that I was at, and also different services.
Right.
And so, understanding the service aspect of things also was something that I had to take in consideration as far as tweaking and
Mhm.
refining that. At the White House Communications Agency, about 1,200 military, more Army than Air Force, more
Right.
Air Force than Navy, more Navy than Marine Corps, and more Marine Corps than Coast Guard.
Mm.
And so, being an Air Force commander of a joint unit that had more Army folks in it, you had to understand, that lingo and be able to speak "huh" and and that kind of thing. But I think
I'm sure your
that
dad appreciates
dad loved that, and so going to the Army Command and General Staff College and getting some of that philosophy and understanding that, and then I went to what's now called the Eisenhower School, but it was ICAF, the Industrial College of the Armed Forces, which is another joint school. And so being around that helped me, in those aspects, but really, applying that throughout. And after I retired, I did 10 years in the private sector with a couple of different small businesses that were government contracted, focused, providing professional services, but still, as the chief operating officer of each one of those, it's a pretty high leadership position within
Yes.
the company. And so I talked about the 5Fs in some terms that my team could understand, that. And so I still apply that. And then now with 3 years in working for the nonprofit, the AFCEA organization, where we bring government, industry, and academia together to do IT, cyber kind of things, machine learning, artificial intelligence, I still have that philosophy, the 5Fs,
Right.
in what I do. I think it's something that's applicable across the board, not just military. At least I've made it applicable.
I was just going to ask that because you talked about in the private sector, and some of our listeners, they take off the uniform, but they still have that foundation of the military, but they're working with people who maybe don't have that foundation of the military. So how did you translate that in a way that they could feel that same foundation, even though they hadn't gone through a military family or through the Air Force Academy?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Navir. And I think as a leader, you have to be aware of that. You have to be aware of your team and their background and their experiences. You also have to speak their lingo, right? I mean, I can't talk just Air Force or military lingo. We talk a lot in acronyms and,
Right.
that kind
Like
of stuff.
FCA. And I'm sure many know it, but do you mind
So
spelling it out?
AFCEA, Armed Forces Communications Electronics Association. And even though we have that, we are more than the Armed Forces now. So we really are known by just AFCEA, even though that's what that acronym stands for. So, I
Okay.
mean, I work with Homeland Security, VA,
Mhm.
and that kind of thing. But to your point, getting folks to understand, where I'm coming from, and me to understand where they're coming from, you have to, take the time, put in the work to do that, so that you can communicate with your
Mhm.
folks, and so that they understand, where you're coming from, and also so that they feel valued.
Right.
Right, that you understand where they're coming from, and I think all of that is important. And I tried to make sure that I did that. And I had, coaches, mentors, and sponsors along the way. So I learned, when some of my mentors, transitioned from the military time. And so when they went to go work in the private sector, I still
Ah.
leaned on them.
Mhm.
Okay, how did you make this transition? And what is it? What is it about? And what are the similarities and what are the differences? What do I need to consider in doing that? And I'm thankful. And that goes back to one key point that I want to make about relationships and nurturing that relationship, over the year. I mentioned General Field,
Mhm.
worked for him in the early 2000s, but here we are, 2025, and, he's in my contacts. He
Right.
will take my call. He will respond to a text and vice versa, building that relationship. And so he's with a nonprofit, now. And
Yes.
so I just still stay in touch with him. The director of the White House Military Office was a Navy admiral that I worked for when I was at the White House. He is now the president and CEO of the United States Naval Institute, Admiral Spicer. 15 years ago, worked for him.
Mhm.
And now we're working together on a big conference. But those relationships are important, and nurturing those relationships. And I learned about nurturing, from my family.
Right.
My grandparents who did that. My grandfather was a farmer.
Mhm.
He had to nurture his crops for them to produce.
Right.
So the same thing analogy applies, in relationships. You have to nurture that relationship, and I'd circle it all the way back to our 40-year reunion now, and my classmates that are here, and nurturing those relationships with those classmates over the years is important to me. I'm the connector within
Yes.
my class, or the nucleus. I mean, those are two nicknames that my classmates have given me: the Colonel Connector and and Nucleus, and I embrace those.
Yes, that's wonderful. Well, I know that you also mentor cadets, and I think my question for you, from the aspect of some of our listeners, is: did you seek out the cadets? Did they seek you out? How does that mentorship relationship start? Because you talked about how, like, for example, General Field, you had that relationship years
Mm.
ago that's kind of carried through. But how do you know when that mentorship is beginning?
Now,
How do you start that?
I think both of those aspects that you mentioned. Do they seek that? There are cadets that seek that based upon just what they've experienced and what they've learned. And then some of the cadets know people that I know, and
Mhm.
so they've been referred to me, and all that. Some were like their parents. I worked with their parents. I
Okay.
mean, particularly in the class of 2023, there are three young ladies that I mentored in the class of 2023. One whose father worked with me at the White House Communications Agency. One whose mother babysat my kids, okay,
Oh.
and then one who's ROTC instructor in junior in high school was my first sergeant.
Wow.
So in those three instances, I was connected to those folks through relationship with either their parents or somebody that worked for me, and
Right.
that kind of thing. And that was the neat thing to be here. I did the march back with those young ladies, and
How
then I
special.
connected those three young ladies who did not know each other at the
Wow.
march back. When we got back on the terrazzo, I
Mhm.
found all three of them and explained my relationship with each of them,
Right.
and they were able to be connected, throughout. And two of them I actually commissioned.
Oh,
Yeah, so
that's special.
that was really really nice. And so, seeking mentorship has just been important to me,
Yes.
right? I've benefited from mentorship and I want to return that favor. I am the chairman of the Air Force Cadet Officer Mentor Association, AFCOMA, whose foundation is mentorship, fellowship, and scholarship. And so I'm passionate about mentorship and doing that. I've seen the benefits of it. People did it for me. And I think you can shorten the learning curve. I think you can just help folks along the way. So I'm very passionate about that.
Well, this has been amazing. I think there's two questions I have left for you.
Okay.
The first one being, and I think we've learned a lot about this along the way, but if you were to summarize, what is something you are doing every day to be better as a leader?
I think every day I take a deep look inside myself, and am I living and breathing, uh, my core values, right? And what am I doing to help the next generation? Trying to put that on my schedule, on my radar. That's important to me. And whether it's, I'm at work with AFCEA, whether I'm out here on my 40th reunion, whether I'm on vacation, I always take the time to mentor folks and pass on that. And I think that's something that's passionate, for me. You mentioned, when we talked about the retirement ceremonies, I mean, I've done 20 plus since I've retired. In fact, I have one in November that I do. That will be my 27th retirement ceremony since I retired. And those things are important to me. And so I reflect. I try to keep, my fitness, my physical, spiritual, and mental fitness in balance every day, so that I can be effective and operate at a peak performance at the drop of the hat.
Yes.
Being ready. And so that's important to me. So there's some self-analysis, in that. I do live and breathe the 5 F's. I think that's important. And I think I've proven to myself that is something that is relatable not only to my time in the military, but my time in the private sector, and now my time at a nonprofit. And I just continue to do that. So self-reflection and really practicing particularly the fitness aspect of the 5 F's.
Wow. That's outstanding. And then you probably share this with your mentees, but what is something that you would help our aspiring leaders, those who are already in leadership roles, in any facet of it, but what is something that they can do today so that they will be more effective as a leader?
So I think being aware that people are watching you and your actions, even when you think that somebody is not watching, they are watching. And so they are trying to learn, what to do next, and to be aware of that. And so I think, again, that goes with, what you asked me first, what do I do every day, but also being aware, of that, so that you can be that example to folks. And then take the time, have some pride in, leaving the organization better than it was when you got there. I mean, it's a cliche, but I think it take a lot of pride in that. And then, when the team does good, everybody does good. So you shouldn't necessarily be out there for any kind of glory. That's going to come. But do it for the right reasons, and give the people the tools, the resources, and the environment to be successful. And then I just take satisfaction when I see one of my mentees get squadron command, go do something. The current commander of the White House Communications Agency, Colonel Kevin Childs, he was a captain and a major in the organization when I was there. Nothing makes me happier than to see my mentees, excel. And then, in this particular instance, he's holding a job that I had.
Wow.
And he's, we still talk. I mean, he had me come out there to speak to the unit about a month ago. And, those things give me a lot of pride and satisfaction and confirmation that I am doing the right thing. And so I'm excited about that.
Well, I can say from the time that I met you a few years ago, you are living what your 5 F's. I see it every time you help champion others. You energize. Just every time I'm around you, I'm energized. So this has been a true joy. Has there been anything that I haven't asked you that you would like to share with our listeners today?
Well, I do want to say personally, thank you to you for all that you do and what the association is doing here. This, Long Blue conversation along the line. I think this is important, to share. There's a class of 1970 that's in the hotel with us, and I don't know really any of those folks, but when I see them walking around with their red hat on, that was their color, and and I think about, okay, 15 years before me, and so I'm 62. These guys are, if I do the public math right, 77, 78, maybe even older, depending upon what they did, and still out there doing things. And some of them here with their spouses and, that kind of thing. That I was just talking to one of my classmates this morning. I said, I wonder if we're going to be like this,
Right.
when our 55th reunion is. And, they were walking around and most were in good health and able to do things. So that gives a lot of pride. But what you're doing, what the rest of the folks here are doing, I think this is amazing. I love the new building, the studio that we're in. This is my first time in the new building, so I'm thankful for this opportunity and just excited about what you guys do.
Well, thank you so much for that. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on Long Blue Leadership.
Well, I appreciate it, and it's just been an honor, and I'm glad you guys timed this for my 85 Best Alive reunion.
And in the new studio, because it wouldn't have been in the new one before.
Right,
so
right.
Yes,
Awesome.
Wonderful. Well, as we bring today's conversation to a close, Michael left a reminder for us that stands out to me. As a leader, you're always on. You're always being watched.
Yeah.
Your steady presence and deep empathy were forged in life's hardest moments, from guiding a young family through an unimaginable loss, to breaking the barriers at the highest levels of service, to mentoring cadets who will carry forward the legacy of leadership. And then there's that framework he lives by, the 5 F's of leadership. It's as practical as it is powerful: family, fitness, flying, mission, fairness, and fun. Each one a reminder that leadership is about balance, grounding, and the courage to keep perspective no matter the challenge. His story reminds us that true leaders create more leaders, and when we anchor ourselves in purpose, faith, and these 5 F's, we leave behind a legacy that lasts. Thank you for listening to Long Blue Leadership. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Retired Navira Walkowitz. Until next time.